Hey everybody, it's Greg here from the Photo Crack blog, and today I wanted to do a video which is a follow-on from a podcast I done recently on product photography. Now, if you haven't checked out the product photography podcast or any of our other Photo Crack podcasts on iTunes, I'll put a link in the description. Feel free to subscribe to that. I'll be doing stuff on that weekly on all different areas of photography, so hopefully you'll find something there which will help you out along the way in your photography. So the reason I done the podcast was I've been doing a workshop in my studio in Dublin on product photography. So it's a one-on-one workshop where people bring in their own equipment into the studio, and I'll show them how to use it to shoot their own products and create really consistent, beautiful images for their e-commerce websites, for their blogs, whatever it is that they're shooting their products for. So I've noticed a lot of people are making the same mistakes, and I go through these in the podcast, but the main one that I see is that people are spending far too much money on their equipment. And it's crazy because product photography is one of the least taxing forms of photography on your equipment. You really don't need any specialized equipment to do product photography. So the reason you don't need any specialized equipment is because product photography kind of sits in the middle of the road of camera settings. And that's really good, because if you're doing product photography, you're going to want to set your camera to the lowest ISO possible, but you don't need it to be a specifically low ISO. You don't need to go overboard and spend money on a camera that will shoot to ISO 25 or ISO 50. ISO 100 or 200 will be just perfect. You also don't want to shoot with a really wide aperture or an aperture too small. You want to shoot maybe in the kind of f16 range is really good generally. And you also don't want to shoot really super fast or really super slow shutter speeds. You're going to be working in around something at 125th of a second maybe. Particularly if you're using flash, you don't want to be going too fast. You don't want to be going generally above 160th of a second due to your flash sync speed. But basically these are all middle of the road settings, so you don't have to spend extra money getting a camera with special capabilities. And with your lens, a basic 18 to 55mm lens will do for just about everything. It's a really good, useful lens because, again, you know, you've got a zoom range on it. It can get pretty close generally. It's got a short enough minimum focusing distance. You're never going to be too far away, so 55mm is generally fine. And also, you know, it will handle an aperture that you're looking for perfectly. So you now have a lens and a camera that will do what you need to do for product photography. Now, obviously, we're going to need some lighting. So we're going to want to choose lighting which will work well for product photography. Now, my recommendation generally for people getting set up is continuous lighting setups. You can go onto eBay now and you can just buy a continuous lighting setup for maybe 130 or 150 euros or dollars or 110, 20 pounds. And that's going to give you 2 or 3 lights with softboxes and a backdrop. And I mean, it's a perfect setup for anybody who's looking to do product photography. Now, in my workshops, I show people how to do as much stuff as they can with just one light, because obviously the more lights you add in, the more complex your build is, and the more things that can go wrong. And when you are shooting product photography, be amazed, everything that you add into the picture can have an effect on everything else that's going on in the picture. So you want to get really good at working with just one light and then building up your setup. Now, when I say just one light, generally what I'd recommend for people to use is one light and a bounce reflector. And I keep sheets of 3mm foam board on standby at all times in the studio. Huge big sizes. Kind of start off at A1 and see if you can get bigger if you can. But basically you just kind of hold that up and it'll bounce the light back off from your continuous light, or your flash if you decide to go with flash. And it's going to help you to create really nice light, because it won't be as bright as the flash, but it'll be almost as bright as the flash. So it's basically replicating a second light. And it's a really useful, easy, quick way to fill in shadows on one side of a product where you don't have to even think about settings whatsoever. All you have to do is kind of move that flash further and further or closer to the product to get the lighting right on that side, and then just move the bounce in really close on the other side. You've got a really good setup. So one thing that I always see in these workshops is that people feel that they need to have got a really expensive camera that is capable of shooting full frame or massive resolution so that they can get a good picture, when that's simply not required at all. It's simply not the case. You don't need an expensive camera. In fact, I would recommend getting a super cheap camera. Second-hand cameras can be really cheap. And I remember my first camera was a my first digital camera was a Canon 20D, and that cost me €2,500. I pre-ordered it a long time before it came out. It eventually came out. I was delighted with myself. It just changed everything for me. There was an 8 megapixel camera, and that might not sound like a lot, but it was huge back then, and it's still huge now for the internet. If you're going to be shooting for e-commerce websites, blogs, that kind of thing, an 8 megapixel Canon 20D is absolutely perfect. And they're available now for as little as like €99 in my local camera store, second hand. So I could go in there, get a 18 to 55mm kit lens, which is a really cool lens, that's nearly new, and a Canon 20D for less than €200. Now that's a killer product photography setup for e-commerce, because it's going to give a file size that's too big for your website. You're going to have to still reduce it down. And I'm going to be able to do my custom white balance, and I'm going to be able to shoot full manual, and I'm going to be able to fit the products in and set my ISO to 100 and set my aperture to f16 and set my shutter speed to around 125th or 160th if I'm working with flash. That's why you don't need to worry about spending crazy money, because you could spend a couple of $100 on a lens and $1,000 or $2,000 on a camera body, and you're going to get very similar results. Because remember, when you're going to shoot and you're going to put your images up on the internet, you're going to have to do a couple of things. You're going to have to reduce down the file size so it doesn't kill your website because it's too big. And by the time you've done that, you've thrown away all those extra pixels that you spent all that money on. You're going to have to, do all these things which are basically going to make your image the exact same images you would have gotten on a 20D with an 18 to 55mm kit lens. So why spend all the money on all that stuff just to throw it away when you can just go and get a Canon 20D and an 18 to 55mm kit lens and just spend the least amount of money possible and get the same results? So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go onto the internet and I'm going to come up with a camera and kit lens setup. And I can guarantee I'm going to get it for less than €200. And because you can always get, and if you wanted to spend an extra €100, you could probably get yourself a full frame camera. You could probably get like a 5D or an original 5D. So you're going up to 12 megapixels again. You're going to be throwing away some of those megapixels by the time you're going down to your internet sized images for your website or blog. But it's crazy what you can get now for so little. And then when it comes to lighting, I use flash systems, but generally for my product photography, because I'm quite comfortable working with them, but I always recommend to people who are getting started, use a continuous lighting setup, because it's really good. You can move lights around and you can see exactly what's happening, and you can use things like live view on your camera as well, so you can see what way the picture's gonna look, whereas you can't really do that with flash. So a continuous lighting setup on eBay is probably only going to cost you maybe about $100 or $130 or euros. You could spend 150 or 160. You can get a tree light setup with a backdrop and stands, and it's quite powerful, and it's going to be more than enough for like 99.5% of product photography images. So you can get really cheap lighting setups. So I'm going to go on eBay then. I'm going to show you a couple of lighting setups that would absolutely work for product photography. So before I go online, I just want to explain that most people, when they come in to do these workshops, tend to bring in 3 or 4 lights with them. Now, that's great, they're there, but generally I consider that to be overkill unless you're very familiar with lighting setups and techniques, because the more lights you add in, the more things that can kind of go wrong. And until you understand the technicalities of studio lighting, whether it's flash or continuous lighting, that doesn't really matter. Until you kind of start to really understand them and get a feel for them, every time you add or move a light, something's going to change and you're not really going to know why. You need to start off with one light, and that's what I would always recommend to people. So even if you do buy a set with 2 or 3 lights in it, just put 2 of them away. Put one away, whatever it is, and leave yourself with just one light, and use that one light to shoot as much as you can. I had somebody come in to do the studio workshop recently with 3 lights, and I was able to show them how to do every single one of their products with just one light and a piece of white 3mm foam board. I keep tons of them at hand all the time in the studio. They're great because you can just cut them, or you can pin things to them, cut holes in them, whatever you need to do, and you can make really cool lighting bounce lights. But what you need to do is just work with one light initially and get that tied down. Get really familiar with just how that one light works. So if you have your camera set up right and you have your power settings on your light up to full blast, what you're going to be doing then is you're just going to be moving your light in and out to change the intensity of the light that's landing on the product. And once you move it and you have it in the right place, if you're using your Instagram, you don't even need to hook up to a computer, so you don't need to worry about expensive, connectivity elements and cameras with Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi elements or Wi-Fi cards or any of this kind of stuff. You should be able to do all your product photography just using the histogram on the back of your camera. So don't get stressed out about getting lighting setups with lots and lots of lights. One light should do. A second light's a great backup, but generally just get used to shooting with one light, because you'd be amazed how much stuff you can shoot with one light. It's crazy. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to pop onto the computer and I'm going to show you some stores, some online stores, and I bet you we're going to be able to find our whole kit for definitely under €400 or dollars, hopefully under three, and we'll see if we can come up with like a super cheap budget setup for maybe even under $200. Just before I pop online, I just want to talk about tripods as well, because I'm sick of seeing people coming in with tripods that are worth about €300 into the studio, when realistically a tripod for 30 or 40 euros probably would have done the job perfectly. You don't need a big camera, you don't need a big lens, you don't need a huge tripod, that's for sure. You're not out in, rugged terrain or landscape, you're not somewhere that there's wind blown and, the wind is howling. You don't need to be able to tie down or weigh down your camera or strap it or lash it to a bag, or you just need a tripod that's going to hold up the camera and keep it steady. So 30, 40 euros will get you a cheap budget tripod that will do the job, particularly in a studio. It'll be more than ample. So don't waste crazy money on tripods. So I'm going to pop online now and I'm going to show you some of my local camera stores, and I can guarantee we're going to find a really cheap setup here, really, really cheap. If we don't get something for under €300, we'll definitely get something for under €400, and I can guarantee you're going to do the same, because most people I've seen come in have spent at least that much money on just their tripod, so we can save all that money, and that money you can guarantee will be better spent somewhere else for your business or in your back pocket or a small holiday, because I've seen people come in with equipment that they could have bought big holidays for and saved themselves an awful lot of money, and they're still not getting a great quality picture until after they do the shoot and learn that they've spent far too much money. So hopefully this video is going to help you guys just not waste all that money and get some really great product shots. So let's hop online and see what we can find. Okay, so I just done a search for used cameras in Dublin, and what I want to do is just have a look and see if I can find a really nice cheap kit. So these guys here is Cons Cameras. I know that these guys update their stock on their used equipment quite frequently. They're really good at keeping it up to date. Now, your local camera stores might not keep their online used equipment section up to date, so I would recommend going in store as well if you've got one local. But if you don't, search online. It's a real handy way to see what's going on. Now these guys offer a 6-month guarantee on all used equipment bought through the shop, which is really, really handy. So I'm going to just go in, check the photography, and I'm going to check for a digital SLR, because obviously we're going to need a camera body. Now I just want to sort these out, price low to high, and let's see how cheap we can get one. And there's a 20D body here for €99. I knew it, because there always is. There's almost always a Canon 20D in these stores for under €100, which is brilliant. Now it's an 8 megapixel camera. I'm just going to do a quick search and just show you Canon 20D. And what have we got? We'll check out the preview, will do nicely. We will check out the specifications. Oh, that's body design. And believe me, it's a fairly robust camera. I gave this camera some knocks back in the day. So you can see it was costing this much at the time, but I remember paying a lot more for it here in Dublin when I pre-ordered it. But basically it shoots RAW. It'll shoot us 8 megapixels, and it'll allow me to do a custom white balance. So that's what's important for me. So that's what you want to see when you're gonna shoot. And it'll also allow you to do a manual mode, and just check that it has manual exposure mode as well. So I'm just going to go back in here and double check. I just want to see if there's a lens that will go with this. An 18 to 55mm lens would do nicely. So I'm going to go in, I'll check the lenses. Now you see, it would be great if I could get two things in the one store, because I can put the 18 to 55mm lens on the 20D and then tested in store before I buy to make sure that they're both looking really good. But we'll see how we get on. There might not be an 18 to 55, but there might be another really good option. We have a Canon EOS M. That's an M mount, so that won't do. I have an EOS M here, but I already have that lens. Here we go, an EFS 18 to 55 for €99. So that's absolutely perfect. That'll do nicely. So I'll just check and see. No, there's no information on it, but look, that's no problem. I know I can pop into these guys tomorrow and have a look at that 20D and that 18 to 55mm lens together. Now, tripods, we'll just have a quick look at their tripods. We'll have a look at the tripod kits, but I know basically that we're not going to get anything too cheap here. You're starting off at about €65. Now, look, that's not too bad. I see people coming in with a lot more expensive tripods into the studio needlessly, and I actually have got a Manfrotto Compact Action that I use. I actually was using for underwater photography attached to a GoPro, so I thought that was really handy because basically you can see here the head on it. It's really nice and easy to use and lock up underwater when you're snorkeling or scuba diving, and you just kind of want to plant the GoPro on a surface, but you can kind of carry it around this as well, and the legs act as a bit of a stabilizer. So it's a really cool little tripod. That's €79, but you could probably get one cheaper than that again. Now I'm just going to pop onto eBay and we'll see what they have in terms of studio lighting. So studio lighting kit, so that's what we're looking for. Now you can see here there's a bunch of options. We have different options. Say here's an 85-watt kit with 2 lights. It comes with a bag. That wouldn't be too bad. You can see here it's got good tripods and all, and it's only €52 now. The thing is, with continuous lighting, the more watts, the brighter the lights. And you can see here there is an awful lot more in this kit. We'll have a quick look at this one and see how it looks. So boxes. So this is a really usable, handy kit for 67, just over €88. So a really cheap kit, and we'll just go down and have a quick look and see. The bulbs are 2 125-watt energy saving light bulbs, and you can see the bulbs are bulbs that you'd be able to pick up and replace these guys no problem with. So we have a couple of options here as well. We've got a white background. That's probably the most usable. Green, chroma key. I generally suggest forget about chroma key for product photography because you get color casts and you have to be really careful what you're doing. It generally tends to end up not looking great. Believe me, if you can light a chroma key background up, you're probably better off just lighting up the white background and making it look nice and bright and saving yourself all that extra trouble. But this looks like a really usable kit. So there we go. There is a kit for under €350 that you will be able to use to make really good product shots. So I'm going to organize to get my hands on a 20D and 18 to 55mm lens, and I'm going to compare it to my 6D in the studio with a couple of different lights and see just how comparable it is in terms of an e-commerce or blog shot for products. I'll try it with a couple of different things and we'll see what way they look. But in the meantime, yeah, this is, I have to say, just a prime example of how easy it is to go online and just find really cheap equipment for your product photography. So hopefully, that just goes to show how easy it is. So there you can see we're after getting a really cheap, awesome camera setup for our product photography for almost nothing. It just goes to show you really don't need to spend crazy money to get a really good product photography solution. So hopefully, if you're going to go out and you're going to buy something for your product photography, for your business, for your blog, for whatever it is, you're going to get a really good, cheap setup that's going to save you a ton of money and you're going to get great pictures from it. So if you haven't subscribed to us yet, please hit subscribe. There's going to be an awful lot more video tutorials coming up soon. I'll be going more in depth into product photography and all other areas of photography. And if you haven't checked out PhotoCrack yet, hit www.photocrack.com in your browser and check out the blog. There's tons of stuff there on all different areas of photography. And the podcast over on iTunes is PhotoCrack as well. Hit subscribe and that. There's going to be tons of new stuff coming up there. Thank you very much for tuning in, and hopefully you're going to get some really great product shots. If you've got any questions at all, put them in the comment box below. Go on to Twitter and tweet your questions. #PhotoCrack. I'll do my best to get back to you as soon as I can. Greg Dorney here at PhotoCrack, thanking you very much for tuning in. Take care. Bye bye.